What was the scandal at your neighborhood? It started as the kind of gossip that sounds too ridiculous to survive past one afternoon. Someone mentioned the mailman and the laugh carried. By the end of the week, people weren't laughing anymore. They were whispering. The rumor was simple and explosive. The mailman had supposedly slept with almost every woman on the block. It didn't matter that no one had proof. In a neighborhood like that, the details weren't the fuel. The possibility was. Suddenly, every routine moment looked suspicious. A front door opening a little too quickly. A conversation on the porch that ended a little too abruptly. Someone's curtains moving at the wrong time of day. And then the rumor evolved into something sharper. The story didn't focus on who the mailman did sleep with. It focused on the one woman he apparently didn't. That exception became the center of the scandal. People tried to guess who she was like it was a game, except it wasn't a game when your own household could be the answer. The most unsettling part was the narrator's hint. Their wife probably knows exactly who it was. That line turned the gossip into a pressure bomb. If she knew, that meant the neighborhood was already treating it like an open secret. If it was an open secret, that meant the rumor had moved from impossible to someone's marriage is about to break. After that, the block changed. Smiles became polite instead of warm. Invitations felt cautious. The mailman's footsteps on the sidewalk started sounding less like a routine and more like a countdown. Because in that kind of rumor, the real suspense isn't whether it happened. It's who believes it and what they do next. Next story. Next. When the condo board announced the reserve fund was gone, the first reaction was disbelief, then panic, then anger. People pay those fees for one reason: security, for repairs, emergencies, the future. And now the board was saying hundreds of thousands had vanished because of a phishing scam. It sounded modern, believable, and strangely convenient. At first, everyone tried to be rational. Scams happen. Criminals are clever. But residents couldn't ignore how clean the explanation was. A faceless attacker, a simple mistake, and no obvious person to blame. Too neat. Then the second wave hit, the rumors that didn't come from the board. According to the comment, investigators later found messages suggesting it wasn't just one person getting fooled by an email. It looked coordinated. Multiple board members allegedly working together. The phishing story wasn't the cause. It was the cover. That's when the fear changed shape, because a scam is random. A scam can happen to anyone, but if the people managing your building were in on it, that meant the threat was sitting in meeting rooms, smiling, taking votes, signing documents. Residents started replaying past interactions, the confident explanations, the rushed decisions, the way questions were deflected. Suddenly, every maintenance delay and every vague budget line item felt like a breadcrumb leading somewhere ugly. The suspense wasn't cinematic. It was slow and sickening. You don't wake up to a siren or a raid. You wake up to an email that says your money is gone, and you realize the people who were supposed to protect it might have been planning it. And if the comment is right, the worst part wasn't the loss. It was the realization that the board had been listening to residents complain, watching families stress, nodding sympathetically, while already knowing exactly where the money went. Next story. The first time someone mentioned it, it sounded like a tasteless joke, the kind of rumor people throw around because it gets a reaction. But the reason it stuck was simple. It involved authority. According to the comment, the scandal was that multiple police officers caught an STD from the same woman. Not one officer, not two. Enough that people started talking like it moved through a whole circle, and once a rumor reaches that scale, it stops being gossip and starts becoming a public spectacle. It wasn't just about sex, it was about the contradictions. Police departments are built on control, uniforms, discipline, procedures. They're used to being the ones who investigate, the ones who keep secrets, the ones who decide what the public gets to know. But a scandal like this spreads differently. It doesn't need official confirmation. It travels on glances, on overheard comments, on the way a coworker suddenly avoids eye contact. And when the rumor centers on a shared source, the tension becomes personal, because now every person is silently asking the same question. Who? How many? Was my local officer one of them? And if it happened, how did no one stop it earlier? The suspense comes from the fact that nobody can say it outright. It stays half-spoken, disguised as "I heard" and "apparently." But people watch. They notice who looks stressed, who starts taking leave, who's suddenly absent from community events. And the deeper twist is how fast respect turns into mockery. Authority is fragile. One scandal can turn a badge from symbol to punchline. If the comment is accurate, the real damage wasn't just embarrassment, it was trust. Because once people believe the department can't manage its own behavior, they start wondering what else gets hidden, and what else only comes out when the rumor gets too big to control. Next story. He was the kind of neighbor you don't think twice about. Quiet, private, a family man, 2 streets over, close enough to recognize, far enough that you don't really know his life. Then one morning, the entire neighborhood woke up to lights and sound. According to the comment, police raided his house at around 6 a.m., sirens flashing, the kind of noise that makes you sit up in bed before your brain even catches up. Curtains moved, front doors cracked open, people stood in their driveways pretending they weren't watching. The shocking part wasn't the raid, it was the reason. He was arrested for running a large weed grow operation in his basement. That's what makes stories like this stick. The idea that something huge can exist right beside you without you seeing it. Everyone starts replaying the past. The times he refused to let people inside, the way he kept to himself, the odd patterns, a window always covered, a garage door always shut. And then there's the twist that turns it from wow into how did we miss this? The comment says many neighbors had apparently been buying from him for years without realizing who their dealer actually was. That means the secret wasn't just hidden. It was threaded into everyday life. People you waved to, people you chatted with, people who acted normal, were quietly participating. The suspense here isn't a chase scene. It's the creeping realization that the neighborhood had 2 versions of him. One version, harmless, quiet, invisible. The other, the person supplying half the block. After the raid, trust shifts. Not because of the weed alone, but because everyone realizes how easily a person can live a double life in plain sight. The house looks the same. The street looks the same, but now every time you pass it, you can't help thinking, if this was happening here, what else is? Next story. It began with a claim that hit harder because it came from inside a marriage. According to the comment, a man said his stay-at-home wife had been sleeping with men in the neighborhood. Not one affair, not one mistake, something that sounded ongoing. The kind of accusation that doesn't just break a relationship, it stains an entire block. Because once a scandal turns into, it could be anyone, the neighborhood stops feeling like a community and starts feeling like a board full of hidden squares. People reacted in predictable ways at first. Some dismissed it as bitter revenge talk. Others leaned into it too quickly, like they'd been waiting for a story to explain small, awkward moments they never understood. And that's how it spreads. Not through proof, but through reinterpretation. A friendly conversation at the mailbox becomes suspicious. A neighbor's wave becomes a signal. A car parked in front of a house becomes evidence. People start mapping timelines that don't exist, building accusations from gaps and coincidences. The suspense isn't who did it, because the comment doesn't name anyone. The suspense is what happens when you can't know, because not knowing makes everyone fill the blank with their own fear. Was it my spouse? Was it me being naive? Was it the guy who always lingers too long talking? And in stories like this, the wife becomes almost secondary, a shadow at the center. The real drama spreads outward. The men who might be involved, the wives who suddenly feel watched, the friendships that quietly fracture. Even if the truth is smaller than the rumor, the neighborhood damage becomes real. People stop inviting each other over, couples become tighter, more defensive, jokes dry up, side conversations start happening in corners. The worst part is how quickly normal life becomes a performance. Everyone acts casual while scanning for reactions, because once suspicion arrives, it doesn't need facts to stay alive. It only needs silence. Next story. In a conservative town, appearances carry weight. People track routines. They notice changes. That's why the story lands like a punch. According to the comment, a young woman next door hid her pregnancy for the entire 9 months. Nobody noticed, or at least, nobody admitted they noticed. Then suddenly, she had a baby. The shock wasn't just the baby, it was how cleanly the reveal was controlled. The comment says she told people she was going to the hospital for an appendectomy. That detail is what makes it feel suspenseful, like a planned escape route, a medical excuse that shuts down questions, a believable reason to disappear. Then she returned with a newborn, and the neighborhood had to confront the fact that a whole life-changing reality had been happening right beside them. After that, everything becomes a rewind. People replay sightings, her walking outside, her posture, her clothes, the angle of her body when she carried groceries. They search their memory for proof they weren't fooled. They wonder who helped her keep it hidden. Family, friends, someone who drove her to appointments, or whether she managed it alone. In a conservative environment, the pressure is thick. That's part of why the rumor spreads. Everyone wants to explain why she hid it, but most explanations come loaded with judgment, and judgment fuels gossip. The suspense comes from the gap between what people think they know and what they actually know. Because if she truly hid it that completely, it means there were layers: denial, secrecy, fear, planning. It means she lived through months of private reality while smiling in public like nothing was happening. And when she came back with the baby, the scandal wasn't just she had a baby. It was the eerie feeling that the neighborhood had been watching her the whole time and still didn't see her at all. Next-story communities often treat religious figures like they're above ordinary suspicion. That's part of what makes this story so disturbing. The scandal is not a rumor about bad behavior. It's a crime that hides behind trust. According to the comment, the neighborhood found out a local priest was abusing children. The shock wasn't only the accusation, it was the way people started connecting past moments that once seemed harmless. The comment mentions the priest giving gifts and having children over for sleepovers. On the surface, those things can look like generosity, mentorship, helping kids. But after the truth comes out, the same details become chilling. What once looked like kindness now looks like grooming. And that mental flip is the moment the community breaks. The suspense here is not about chasing a culprit. It's about the slow discovery of how long something can hide when people don't want to believe it. Neighbors start asking themselves the most painful questions. Did we see signs? Did a child ever look uncomfortable? Did someone ever hint at something and get ignored? Did we shrug off a warning because it would have been too horrible to consider? And once that realization spreads, the scandal becomes contagious. People lose faith not only in the priest but in their own judgment. Because if someone like that could operate openly, it means the systems around them, the adults, the institutions, the social rules, failed. It's the kind of scandal that doesn't fade into funny gossip. It changes a neighborhood's emotional map. Every place connected to him, a church hall, a house, a familiar path, becomes heavy with what people missed. And the worst part is that once trust like that collapses, it doesn't rebuild easily. Next story. This one is frightening because it's so ordinary on the surface. According to the comment, the storyteller was a child when a family friend assaulted them. During it, neighbors heard screaming, but assumed it was just kids playing. That detail is the whole horror. The way danger can sound like normal life. Children scream when they play, they scream when they fight, they scream when they're excited. The neighborhood background noise becomes a perfect cover, not because people are cruel, but because people are trained to interpret what they hear in the least alarming way. The comment says the truth came out years later. The storyteller finally told their father, and police got involved. The attacker was found guilty. Even without graphic details, the suspense here is emotional and slow. It lives in the gap between what was happening and what everyone thought was happening. It's the memory of screaming that no one responded to, the moment you realize that a child's distress can be swallowed by normal assumptions. After it comes out, the neighborhood's scandal isn't a flashy headline. It's an invisible stain. People start remembering those screams. They start wondering what other screams they've ignored. They start thinking about the times they dismissed something strange because it was easier than confronting the possibility of real harm. The story also carries a quiet tension about silence. The abuser wasn't a stranger. The comment says it was a family friend, someone with access, familiarity, and trust. That's the kind of person nobody wants to suspect, which means suspicion gets delayed until the victim finally forces it into the open. And when the police become involved, the atmosphere changes. Everyone looks at the same houses and feels something different. The street doesn't look dangerous, but now it feels like it could have been. Next story. This story doesn't rely on a single shocking incident. It relies on a mood, a constant pressure. According to the comment, the storyteller grew up around mafia-connected people in Philadelphia, New Jersey. The scandal in that kind of place isn't always what happens. It's what everyone silently agrees not to say. You learn it early. You don't ask too many questions. You don't repeat what you overhear. You don't react when something feels off. Some streets have rules that aren't written anywhere, but everyone follows them anyway. The suspense comes from the idea that normal life and danger can overlap perfectly. A neighbor smiles at you, hands you a plate of food, asks about school, and yet everyone knows that neighbor's name carries weight. Not official weight, street weight, the kind that makes other people step aside. In a neighborhood like that, the smallest details become loaded. A car idling too long, a sudden disappearance, a guy you used to see every day who simply isn't there anymore. No explanations, no public grief, just absence. And the thing that makes it feel real is that people don't narrate it like a movie. They narrate it like weather, like it's part of the environment. That's what the comment captures, the sense that there were things everyone knew but nobody repeated. The silence wasn't just fear, it was culture. The unspoken understanding that curiosity isn't admirable, it's risky. The scandal becomes psychological, living inside a community where secrets are normal and questions are dangerous. Even if you never witness a crime directly, you live around the edges of consequences. You grow up with the awareness that wrong person, wrong words can change your life. That's why it sticks. Not because it gives a list of events, but because it describes a neighborhood where suspense is permanent, where the tension isn't a moment. It's the air. Next story. This one reads like a neighborhood legend, but it's terrifying because it's specific. According to the comment, in the 1970s, many families in the area kept rabbits in backyard hutches, sheds, little enclosures, a normal part of home life. Then someone started taking rabbits from the hutches, beheading them, and placing them back. The horror isn't just cruelty, it's the deliberate message. If an animal disappears, you can blame a predator. If an animal is killed and left behind, someone wanted it to be seen. Someone wanted fear to spread. That's why it became a scandal. Not because it was one household's tragedy, but because it forced the entire neighborhood into the same question. Who would do this, and why? People checked their locks more carefully. Kids stopped treating backyards like safe places. Parents started scanning strangers. But the most unsettling thought is that it might not have been a stranger at all. It could have been someone close enough to move quietly between yards, someone who knew routines, someone who blended in. That's where the suspense grows. The culprit was never identified. The neighborhood never got the relief of certainty. Without a culprit, every person becomes a possibility in the back of your mind. And it's a particularly cruel type of fear because it uses something innocent, rabbits, pets, childhood caretaking, and turns it into a threat. It teaches people that the safe, ordinary parts of their lives can be invaded. Even decades later, it sticks because it's unresolved. It becomes the warning tale people repeat. The details stay sharp because they're abnormal and intimate, and because the killer placing them back makes it feel less like random violence and more like a presence that walked away unseen. Next story. This one is short in the comment, but it's chilling because of what it doesn't say. According to the comment, the storyteller said the government killed 2 of their neighbors in Minneapolis. No further details were given, no timeline, no explanation, just that sentence. And that's why it creates suspense. When someone says something that heavy without elaboration, it feels like either a personal certainty or something too dangerous to expand on. Either way, the silence becomes part of the story. It makes you imagine the gaps, and imagining gaps is what suspense thrives on. In neighborhoods where something dramatic happens involving authorities, people often split into 2 groups, those who accept the official explanation and those who don't. The second group builds a parallel narrative, whispers what really happened, connections that aren't written down. The comment doesn't describe those steps, but the statement implies that kind of belief took root, and it changes how a place feels. Once people believe the state can target ordinary neighbors, the ordinary becomes unsafe. A parked car looks suspicious. A knock at the door sounds different. People start asking, why them? What did they know? What were they involved in? The real part here isn't proven detail. It's the existence of the claim as a neighborhood scandal. The scandal is that someone in the community believes it strongly enough to say it plainly, like it's obvious. That belief spreads quietly. It shows up in how people talk about officials, how they go silent when certain topics come up, how they hesitate before speaking in public spaces. Because when a story can't be fully told, it can't be fully resolved. And unresolved fear doesn't fade, it hardens. Next story. This scandal isn't about a confession. It's about a detail that people interpret like evidence. According to the comment, a wife was rumored to be overly friendly with a neighbor. Nothing official was said, but the closeness was noticed. Then she gave birth to a daughter with bright red hair, while neither the wife nor her husband had red hair in their family history. The neighbor she was rumored to be close with did have red hair, That's the kind of coincidence people treat like a verdict. It's not a DNA test. It's not proof. But in a neighborhood gossip ecosystem, it doesn't need to be. It becomes a story people can repeat in one sentence, and those are the stories that survive. The suspense comes from what follows. Everyone knows, but nobody says it out loud. The family continues living there. The husband keeps showing up, the wife keeps smiling, the neighbor keeps existing nearby, and the whole community carries an unspoken question like a weight. People start watching interactions like they're scenes on a stage. A glance becomes meaningful. A pause becomes suspicious. The husband's tone becomes something people analyze. Even the child becomes a symbol, not as a person, but as the neighborhood's proof. That's the ugly part of these stories. They turn human lives into gossip objects. The comment suggests the neighborhood treated it like an open secret. Obvious enough that the scandal wasn't the rumor itself, but the shared agreement to pretend it wasn't happening. The tension is in the performance of normality, because if everyone believes it, then every social gathering becomes a test. Who still invites them? Who avoids them? Who acts too friendly? Who acts too cold? The scandal starts reshaping friendships and alliances without anyone admitting why. And the most suspenseful part is that the truth never arrives in the story. Only the suspicion, the hair color, and the silence, which is exactly why it lasts.